Hello everyone. Im Saudashing, when humans first began practicing agriculture, various tools gradually emerged in response to the growing agricultural needs, particularly in this latitude. So, what did the emergence of agriculture signify? It signified the dawn of civilization. It was through the accumulation of technology that civilization was born. And it was this same technological progress that solidified it. As a result, more and more people longed to join these civilized nations. Those tribes still reliant on gathering and hunting were gradually marginalized by civilizations like Xia, Shang, and Zhou, becoming mere bystanders in the river of history. All right, to summarize at the very least, we can confirm that the late periods of the Shang and Xia dynasties overlapped in time. In other words, if Erlitou is confirmed to be the capital of the Xia dynasty, it could only be one of the late Xia capitals. Erlitou, through carbon dating, has been essentially confirmed to span both the late Xia and early Shang periods. This dating result is almost indisputable, proving that Xia, Shang, and Zhou were not as simply successive as later generations believed. In many cases, these three dynasties actually coexisted, forming a complex three-body problem. Personally, and without responsibility, I believe that the early Xia capitals should have been located in southern Shanxi, China, rather than near the Erlitou site in Henan. If the Shang chronology project gives the start of the Xia dynasty as 2070 BCE, then the timeline of the Erlitou site is nearly 300 years later than the early Xia period. Why do I think the early Xia period was in southern Shanxi, China? One reason is that the Western Zhu's founding of the state of Jin required it to inherit the governance of Xia through military rule, indicating that the Zhou people believed the Jin region was still following the political principles of the Xia. This political correctness reflects the Zhou people's awareness that many descendants of the Xia still lived in southern Shanxi, and therefore, the Zhou had to maintain Xia governance through Jin to stabilize the population. Why were there still Xia people in southern Shanxi? This has to do with the tradition of the two kings and three houses. The Shang replaced the Xia, and the Zhou replaced the Shang. But they did not wipe out the people of the previous dynasty. Instead, they resettled their descendants near their old capitals. This method of ethnic assimilation is similar to the establishment of the state of Luingjizu, where the Zhou allowed Lu to implement Shang governance, but follow Zhou laws. The logic is consistent. Furthermore, from the archaeological discoveries at the Taosi site, it is divided into three phases. The third and most recent phase likely represents the earliest Xia capital, or what could be called the first capital of Xia. At this point, many of you may have noticed that I am essentially assuming the existence of the Xia dynasty. The Shang chronology project has given me such confidence. Scholars did not attempt to prove the existence of Xia, but instead provided an upper limit for its timeline. While debates about this timeline persist, it is largely agreed that the upper limit for the Xia dynasty is around 4,000 years ago, which is not highly contested. Many scholars who doubt the existence of the Xia dynasty argue that it was fabricated by the Zhou people to legitimize their conquest of the Shang. In response to this, Mr. Zhu Fenggan made a compelling argument in 2003. He pointed out that early Western Zhou texts already mentioned enjoying the legacy of Xia, indicating that there were many Shang survivors at the time. If the Zhou people had fabricated a Xia dynasty to legitimize their conquest of the Shang, the Shang survivors would not have accepted it. Mr. Zhu's argument hits the mark, since the Western Zhou referred to the civilization before the Shang as Xia. Was there also a mention of Xia during the Shang period? Indeed, the character Xia appears in oracle bone inscriptions, but in those contexts, it more often refers to a person's name rather than a dynasty. Therefore, Whether the Xia, in oracle bones, refers to the Xia dynasty remains debatable. The Shang people referred to themselves as Da Yi Shang Great City, Shang Guo Tiang Yi Shang Heaven's Mandate Shang, while the Zhou people often called them Yin. For example, in the Shanxi Book of Documents, it says, the king of Wu was guided by the Yin. And in the Shijing Book of Odes, it mentions Yin's excellent ministers. This brings up the distinction between self-designation and external designation. For instance, Zhang Huyi referred to himself as the ruler of the state of Zhang, but those around him called him Sui. The state of Nanshan called itself Shen, but neighboring states referred to it as Si. The Shang had a similar situation, never called themselves Yin, which has led some scholars to speculate that the Shang people might not have referred to the Xia dynasty as Xia either. So, what did the Shang people call the Xia dynasty? The only positive evidence from oracle bone inscriptions that may indicate the existence of the Xia dynasty is Xia in the oracle bones. Xia was first a clearly defined place name, and secondly, it was also an object of Shang rituals, which is relatively reliable. For example, one oracle bone record states divine at Xia. Here, I is not a generic term for all Western cities of the Shang, but refers to a specific city. This is evident because the oracle bones mention the eastern lands, western lands, southern lands, and northern lands, but no eastern city, southern city, or northern city, only Xia. Additionally, the Jihanha bamboo slips recorded from the west, reaching Xia, demolish its structures, and the Tingshu bamboo slips in the Yin Declaration also mentioned. Following the defeat of Niya, Xia was subdued. This shows that, whether in Shang oracle bones, or in the Warring States period Tingshu bamboo slips, Xia or subdued, Xia specifically, referred to the capital of the Xia dynasty. So, why are there so few records about Xia and the Xia dynasty in Shang writings? We must understand that although oracle bones contain detailed records, most were used for divination. The purpose of divination was to predict the future, not to review the past. You wouldn't divine about who is my father, because that is an established fact unless you suspect hidden details. In short, considering that the Erlitou site spans the late Xia and early Shang periods, we can speculate that, in the eyes of the Shang people, Xia might have been a city to their west. Since most oracle bones appeared in the mid to late Shang period, Xia could refer to either the Xia people's capital or the Shang capital. While this theory isn't ironclad, it is at least illogical. Why was the capital of the Zhou people called Luoy, the capital of the Shang called Daya, and the capital of the Xia also called Xia? What's the significance of the character Yi? In fact, the real capitals of the Xia, Shang, and Zhou dynasties had no city walls. For example, the Yin ruins, which have been excavated for over a century, have yet to reveal any walls. Similarly, the Erlitou site, excavated for 60 years, also lacks city walls. The same applies to the capital sites of the Western Zhou, which also have no walls. The absence of city walls was, in fact, a hallmark of political correctness during the three dynasties Xia, Shang, and Zhou. Some might say, maybe the archaeologists haven't worked hard enough? In truth, many sites have been excavated for decades or even centuries. Even if these walls had been built with nanotechnology, they should have been found by now. So, if the capitals of the Xia, Shang, and Zhou had no walls, what about the Taosi site, which seems to have walls? I previously mentioned that the third phase of the Taosi site was likely the earliest capital of the Xia dynasty. Isn't this contradictory? Actually, archaeological findings show that the Taosi site had walls during the first and second phases, But by the third phases, those walls had been torn down. Why did this change occur? It may have been due to a revolution in late Taosi. A revolution typically involves a bottom-up struggle, while a top-down change would be called a reform. So, who was the bottom in Taosi? The most likely candidate is Zhou, the Great Sun Qi. Before the Qin dynasty, Yao, Shang, and you practiced a system of abdication. Although this system might differ from the Confucian version we're familiar with. Nonetheless, the throne would change hands, though the upper nobility rarely shifted. If the Taosi site did experience a revolution and became the first capital of the Xia Dynasty, then the dating data from Taosi becomes even more interesting. The third phase of the Taosi site dates to around 400 to 3900 years ago, aligning perfectly with the timeline proposed by the Shang chronology project for the founding of the Xia Dynasty. Some may argue, was just capital in Shanxi? Does that mean Taosi is Shanxi? Not exactly. Shanxi was just fiefdom when he was a duke, not the capital of the Xia Dynasty. Furthermore, it's generally believed that just capital, Shanxi, corresponds to the Wangkengtian site. This site covers about 500 square meters, which, compared to the 3 million square meters of Taosi and Erlitou, makes Shanxi a less likely candidate for the Xia capital. Additionally, the Bamboo Annals records Emperor Yu ascended the throne in Xia, indicating that Xia held a higher status than Wangkengtian, further supporting the hypothesis that Taosi was the birthplace of the Xia dynasty. Taosi, as the cradle of the Xia dynasty, is akin to Fengdian for the Ming dynasty or Shanging for the Qing dynasty. The new emperor ascended the throne there, in accordance with the ancient ritual requirements. Finally, Yu the Great is also known by another name, a wind. Remember this name. On a red painted amphora excavated from the Taosi site, 2 characters were found, and some scholars believe they are Wenyao, while Professor Feng Shi and others argue they represent Wenming. Personally, I lean towards the Wenming interpretation. On the one hand, the walls of late Taosi were torn down, symbolizing the unfortified capitals that were a hallmark of the Xia, Shang, and Zhou periods. On the other hand, in ancient texts, we see that the Xia people often referred to themselves as Wenxia. This one was not just a symbol of civilization, but also a form of inner cultivation and cultural belief. Confucius said, "How rich is the culture of Zhou? I follow the Zhou, where one carried on the spirit of the Xia." In contrast, the Shang people revered the mandate of heaven and worshipped spirits and gods, which had some similarities with Dongji culture. Mr. Fu's Inyan once proposed the Eastern Yi and Western Xia theory, which states that the East belonged to the Yi and the West to the Xia. Ancient people used the Taihang Mountains as the dividing line between East and West. East of the Taihang Mountains was the cultural area of the Yi, while west of the Taihang Mountains was the Xia cultural area. For example, the octagonal symbol on the jade turtle from Linjiaten in Naanhui belongs to the Dongji cultural area. However, such symbols have not been found west of the Taihang Mountains in the Xia cultural area. This suggests that the Eastern Yi and Western Xia theory is likely valid. This Yi actually refers to today's Yi people. The reason the character for Yi changed over time is that after the founding of New China, Premier Zhou Enlai, out of goodwill, decided to stop using terms like barbarians to refer to ethnic minorities, and instead changed it to the modern character. Some might ask, was the Yi in the East? How did they end up in the Southwest? This was because the Duke of Zhou led an expedition against the Eastern Yi, and over time, they gradually became the Southern Yi and Southwestern Yi. Finally, Let's return to the issue of the early Xia Dynasty. According to historical records, Emperor Yao ruled from Pingdian. Emperor Shang also ruled from Pingdian. And Emperor Ya's capital was also in Pingdian. Clearly, these match the tradition of abdication. The Taosi side is most likely the legendary Pingdian area in Shanxi, China.